Who are you?
I am a online fitness coach specifically for women in the rave and dance music community.
How do you build your routine around these high intensity shows?
I literally just try to think of myself as a bag of bones moving through mobility. You have to align your physical health journey with your mental health journey, because if you're trying to focus on one and not the other, you're going to crash and burn eventually. First things first, meal prep. That should be the biggest thing too. Like when you come back from a festival, the first thing you should be focused on is
Welcome to today's episode of Getting to Know You. I'm your host, Cameron Edward Benton, and on today's episode, I have the great pleasure of introducing you to Dana Foster. Dana is a fitness coach for the Rave community, where she specifically helps on empowering women to live their healthiest, strongest lives on and off the dance floor. I loved my conversation with Dana because we got to talk in a lot of nerdy fitness stuff, talking about how to optimize your recovery and your workouts around the festivals that you're going to, and just living the life that you want to live. I think Dana is just a beautiful example of living that fully self-empowered and fully self-expressed life, being somebody who owns a business, still continues to rave, and is optimizing their health at every opportunity. So without further ado, here's getting to know Dana Foster. Who are you?
Well, my name is Dana, or Coach Dana. I go by Dana F Fit, or the EDM as Fuck Fitness Coach on Instagram. I am an online fitness coach specifically for women in the rave and dance music community. I was a personal trainer. I have 4 different certifications as well, and I studied biology in school. So studying health and fitness has been something that I have been very passionate about for a very long time. And especially as it pertains to women's health and our fitness goals, and balancing that within the rave community is something that I specifically focus in.
Wonderful. And how did you get started as a raver?
I started in 2015. Escape Halloween was my first ever rave. And when I went to my first ever rave at Escape, it felt like I found something that I was searching for a really long time in my life. When I was in high school, I had a lot of traumatic experiences growing up, and music was my place of comfort, my place of healing, my place of self-expression. But throughout high school, I would go to teenage nightclubs to be able to experience music in that like social setting, to dance with people and be in that energy. But honestly, they were really gross. It was just like teenage freak out fest, and I was just like not really about it. And then when I went to my first rave, I was like, this is exactly what I've been searching for. And then ever since then, I've just been hooked.
Yeah. What was it that you really, I guess, experienced it like you found when you were saying, like, I found what I was searching for? Like, what was that thing that you were searching for?
Just a way to experience this shared love and passion for music and movement and expression in a collective environment. You know, often when we go through our day-to-day life, we feel like we have to wear a mask. Shout out to anybody who is on the ADHD and the spectrum, because we live that every fucking day. And you know, it's not even something I realized until later, that it's a place where we can let down the mask. We can let down and be who we authentically are, and really learn to like accept ourselves and express ourselves in the setting with other people, and feeling that energy. And you know, it's almost like when you go in, you feel like you're living your own music video. It's so fun.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I feel so often similarly at a rave where it's like I'm just able to, be myself. Um, I just lost on the Instagram live. Oh no, I'm still there. Cool. I have like a timer set up for for my phone, which is great, but just not for, I guess, doing this Instagram live. Um, yeah, like I resonate super hard with that, because I think going to a rave is a special place where you are allowed to just be fully who you are. It's something that was such a big place for me to start to expand my what I was comfortable with other people seeing, right? Like I was wearing like a spirit hood that my friend let me borrow, and I remember like buying rave clothing even at the rave itself, and being worried about like how people were going to perceive me, and then being in that environment, and then people complimenting me on these things that I am excited to wear, but insecure about at the same time. And then people finding that vibe, and like really trusting that like how I wanted to express myself, there are other people who are going to like that, even if other people in my group didn't express themselves the same way, or express themselves with a different vibe, or whatever that is. And just trusting whatever you love is, I think, such a special part of that community.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Were there parts of yourself in particular that you weren't able to express as comfortably before going to a rave that you are now?
Well, I typically am a very like high energy person, and my for me, I feel like music can guide my energy. Like if I listen to something that's really high energy, it gives me energy. If I listen to something more calming, like melodic chill step, it's a little bit more mellow. If I listen to something that sparks hope, like I feel like music has been a very thorough guide in my life, and so I kind of get to choose, where do I want that energy to be guided based on the music that I choose to listen to and the environment that I choose to immerse myself in. And so that's something that's been really helpful. Like when I was in, I have like very strong memories of when I was about 12 or 13 years old when Titanium first came out, and I was going through a really, really hard time in my life. I was being bullied and harassed, both online and at school by this kid and his friends, and I felt like I had no escape, and there were points where I was just like, feeling like life was just hopeless. But I would be in the sauna at the gym while my mom was working out and just belting out Titanium, and even though I'm not a good singer, by the way, so I was like mostly alone. I think some people probably got scared off by me, but whatever. It gave me a lot of like hope for the future. So like, again, music is just something that can really guide us in the direction that we want to go.
What was the direction that you were wanting to go at that point in your life when you started raving?
I just wanted to see myself building more confidence. Again, when I was like harassed, this person did everything they could to crush my confidence, my self-esteem, my self-worth, and the way that I was raised to wasn't really constructive to building that self-esteem either. And so going to raves and seeing everybody confident in who they were, what they wore, gave me hope that, I can build myself up in that way too.
Beautiful. Great. And so when did you start getting into the fitness industry then? Because you have your own business, it's very successful and thriving, at least from what I can tell on the outside, and you seem pretty, self-fulfilled and like very self-expressive and like who you are and your own authenticity. So talk to us a little bit about that journey. How did that get started?
So it definitely did not start off in the healthiest of ways, which is another reason why I do what I do. And there are a lot of different phases that I've gone in my fitness journey, and on some degree, I'm grateful for a lot of the mistakes and the difficulties that I've gone through because it helps me understand a lot of the women that I work with. So it first basically got started when I was 12, so to speak. I did not really exercise, but I had binge eating problems. When I was bullied, I would lock myself in my bedroom. I would eat literal bags of chocolate chips and family-sized hot Cheetos. I was almost 200 pounds when I was like 12 years old.
Wow.
And the person who was harassing me basically harassed me to the point of developing an eating disorder. I went from almost 200 pounds to 96 pounds, and I was just like running all the time and restricting all the time, and just trying to like lose weight. And I was like, if I get smaller, I'll be accepted. And there was a point where I was wanting to actually run competitively because I actually started to enjoy it, but I still had a lot of that negative association with it. And so I like ran cross country for years, and then about halfway through, it really was raving that kind of got me out of that restrictive mindset, because I was like, I want to be strong. I wanted to build a rave booty, and I also just wanted to have like better strength. But it took me years to really kind of break out of that like cardio bunny restrictive mindset cycle, and that definitely wasn't helped by kind of the substance use that I got into shortly after I started raving, because that kind of started to kind of bring back some of those old habits and those old tendencies. I was like drinking a lot more, using substances more, but then about around 2018, 2019, I started to take strength training really seriously, and I started to enjoy it more. I still made a lot of mistakes. I was still kind of like still stuck in some of those old ways. But as I started to learn more about strength, about the human body, about muscle development, getting certified, and also like working with my own coach as well, who pushed me through my first ever reverse into a bulk to gain strength. I was like, wow, I love feeling strong. This is great. And so I kind of continued on with that. It did kind of backtrack a little bit when I did my first bodybuilding show, but doing that kind of pushed me to another low point that made me realize like I don't want to reach that kind of low again and push
Right.
myself into an unhealthy state, because it's so difficult to enjoy the things that you love out of life when you're constantly doing things that are draining you, draining your energy, throwing off your hormones, and getting stuck in the cycle of like comparison. You compare
Mhm.
yourself to somebody else's fitness journey, thinking that you should be where they are. You've been in this as long as they are. Why aren't you any farther along? Why aren't you around where they are? Like, it really taught me that our journeys are so different. We're going to go through a lot of challenges, but just because in the past we may have had behaviors that worked against us doesn't mean that we can't continue to work on the behaviors that push us forward. So
Mm.
I let go of obsessing, trying to fit within a certain weight range, and focus more on like, is my body strong? Do I feel good on a day to day basis? How's my hormone health? Like, women, honestly, even though having a menstrual cycle seems like a disadvantage, it could be annoying dealing with PMS and shit, it's honestly a really great indicator of how our internal health is. And that our internal health directly influences our mental health. When
Mm.
I hit my low point back in late 2021, early 2022, and I started to take my hormone health seriously, I saw huge improvements in my mental health when I started to let go of trying to fit in a certain image and focus on like what is good for my body, what's good for
Mhm.
my health, what's good for my current lifestyle and goals right now. That's when that mindset started to shift to something that's more constructive and healthier. And again, I don't, even though I regret hurting my body the way that I did in some phases of my fitness journey, I am also grateful for it because it taught me to identify, if I'm feeling a certain way or certain mindsets come back, that I'm able to work through them and overcome them.
Beautiful. Yeah, one of the questions that I had from one of my friends was like, what are some of the kind of unique challenges that women particularly face with fitness, but particularly regarding to like their body, their mental health, and kind of this connection that they often can deal with and struggle with in different ways.
So we definitely have a lot of challenges, especially in the age of social media. And again, we look at social media, we see somebody's highlight reel, and also there are people who are not necessarily doing the healthiest things that can portray them as healthy, and that can really send a message that isn't constructive to somebody's journey. Like if somebody's talking about doing long fasts and they're working out on an empty stomach, raving on an empty stomach, and somebody has hormonal imbalances, they have a highly
Mm.
stressful job, they're trying to, feel healthier, they're trying to have better energy, they're trying to build muscle, they're trying to lose fat, like over stressing the body like that is actually going to deter them rather than progress them forward. And as women, we are more sensitive to physiological stressors like raving, mental stress, like, long work days or a really stressful job. Going on like really long fasts and not fueling our body properly, like we're more sensitive, because if we elevate our cortisol too much, that can also decrease progesterone, that can throw us off balance, and that in turn can impact our energy levels, our mental health, our physical health, and all of that. So it's like, raving can be a great healing experience, but taken too far, it really can hold us back, especially when you start to consume things like alcohol, like substances. You need to, again, like pace yourself, and not just think about pacing yourself over the course of a weekend, but think about pacing yourself over the course of the month and the year. Like if you're going to a rave every 2 weeks and you are drinking or you're taking substances or you're doing both, it's very difficult for the body to actually relax, especially because
Mm.
raving is a constant hit workout. So there's like this thing on social media where it's like raving is great cardio. Yes, that's not wrong, but if we're using it to lose weight, then again, it can be more detrimental to us in the long run, especially as women, when our motivation can be heavily influenced by our menstrual cycle. I'm not going to say determined, because even when I had hormonal imbalances, I was still very disciplined. I would still show up and to my workouts. I would still do my cardio. I was still, tracking my macros, even though I felt like total shit. Those were things that I just was like, these are the things that I need to do to get to where I want to go. And even like that in itself, it taught me what's too much for my body.
Mhm.
So even though it was really tough, it taught me what not to do.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think the unfortunate reality is that we learn a lot of like life's lessons through the hard way, right? We learn them through trying different things out, and it's not necessarily like how you have to do it, right? But a lot of times it's like when we don't have that support, when we don't have that information, there hasn't been a Dana Foster before, right? So there hasn't been somebody to get the wisdom that you have to pass it down to other people yet. Like you're the only person with that specific level of experience, with all the things that you have that you can actually pass that down to other people who might be having a similar experience and like learn from. Um, you talked a lot about like raves and stress, and stress is not the best thing for well, even weight loss or fat loss or muscle building, which is like part of the goal of this whole cycle. And there's a lot of bodybuilders who are also in or connected to the rave scene in one way or another. I'm curious, like, is there anything that you feel like you need to do in particular to adjust your workouts as you're coming up to a festival or after a festival so that you're keeping in like line with your goals but are like building in the extra recovery? Do you do more or less cardio? Like how do you build your routine around these really high intensity shows?
I love that question. One second, let me close my door real quick because my cat just opened it.
It's all good.
Abby, my door I have to click, and if it doesn't click, then she can open it. So when it comes to preparing for an event, there's a lot of different factors that come into play. First of all is how many events are you going to that are coming up? Like if it's just one big event and you don't really have anything in between, your approach might be a little bit different than if say you have a big event and then you're going to a small event a few weeks before, a month before you're going to another small event. So that factor goes into play. And another thing too is like your lifestyle as well. Like the way that I trained for Lost Lands last year was a little bit than I trained this year because I have extra responsibilities at home to take care of. So this year I didn't do as much cardio leading into Lost Lands, and it wasn't as intense cardio. I was focusing more on like the nutrition aspect, the steps. I have a walking pad in my office. And then when it comes to like post-festival recovery, that also depends too. Like if you caught the Wook flu, you're gonna have a little bit of a different bounce back than say if you come back and you just have a mild cold or you didn't catch anything luckily at all. I focus a lot on strength training though. Like cardio and getting steps is helpful, but ultimately you want to have some strength, especially in your lower body, your hips, glutes. Like ladies, building your glutes has a double whammy. Like not only do you build a bang and rave booty, but also it strengthens your hips and improves your posture. Like there's no downside to training your glutes and training on mobility. And that overall volume that you have from lifting is far more effective than just doing a shit ton of cardio and getting a shit ton of steps. It's more effective. You'll get more of an effective workout in a 30-minute leg session than a 30-minute cardio session when it comes to building your stamina for festival season. And so there's so many different layers to it that, it depends on what's going on in your life, the events that you have, and also like physiological signs too. Like I could have probably pushed my cardio up a little higher this year, but over the last month and a half, I've been dealing with a little bit more fatigue. So we were trying to be a little bit more moderate with my protocol leading into Lost Lands. We didn't want to overstress my body. I was already showing some signs of it because I moved states. I went to Wasteland 2 weeks prior to Lost Lands, and that was a road trip. And then, of course, that was a stressor. I'm really glad that I stayed sober at Wasteland because that helped my body recover just a little bit faster leading into Lost Lands. But again, this is why it's a very individualized approach, and it is a learning process based on your consistency and your are you being aware of what you're doing leading into it and having that data too. This is why I think that women really need to like track their cycles, track your workouts, or at least kind of get a range of like what your performance is like, and knowing your nutrition too. Being aware of your nutrition can help guide you in a lot of different ways when it comes to understanding like what is the optimal amount of protein you need to recover better? What is the optimal amount of carbohydrates you need to recover better? Making sure that you're getting enough calories to deal with the stress of all of it. Are you getting good quality food? And, your metabolism can change too throughout your fitness journey as well. So I wish I could give one solid answer to that question, but it's a little more complicated than that.
Yeah, I mean, part of what I'm hearing, right, is that there's a huge individual component, and a lot of it is figuring out like what is that individual component for you. And like you even mentioned things like, learning out like your optimal protein intake for recovery or carb intake for recovery. I'm curious, like, how do you guide clients through figuring that out? Because that's something that is really, really difficult, right? And it can be, there's so much different fitness advice out there, right? About how much you should be eating or shouldn't be eating, how much of a deficit to be in or not be in, how much protein to be eating. There's so much information out there. And I really think more and more that it's like so bio individual, and we remove ourselves often from the individuality, trying to fit into these different boxes that people are telling us to fit in. So, how do you actually help somebody find those unique pieces so that they can create that customized plan and build that level of self awareness?
Well, the first thing is to make sure that they have a fairly consistent diet, that they are tracking their diet, they're monitoring their protein, their fiber intake as well, because eating a lot of protein without getting enough fiber, that's asking to get backed up, and that's not comfortable. But when you have that data over an extended period of time, and when I do check-ins with my clients, I'm paying attention to physiological signs like how's their menstrual cycle, how's their sleep, how's their energy levels. And like, again, this is something that is collected over the span of months. You can't really gauge based off of 1 month, but we kind of start them off with a baseline, like this is your protein goal, this is our caloric range goal that we're shooting for. I don't believe in keeping them in like super tight boxes. Like if your calorie goal is 2000, you have to be like on the dot. No, we want like about a plus or minus 100 calorie range depending on the individual and their approach. But in terms of like, understanding exactly what they need, it's listening to what the body is telling them, and also knowing what's going on in their life too, like what kind of stressors are they going through. I've had girls who have moved careers, who've moved states, who did back-to-back festivals, and we're focusing on trying to stay consistent as much as possible and then building off of that. So if they have been tracking their nutrition and we notice their menstrual cycle is running late, okay, well, what do we need to adjust to start to push us to actually have a more regular menstrual cycle? Is there other stressors going on? And also, how is their relationship with food? That's also a really important one. Well, how is food impacting their digestion? I've had a lot of women who they would experience issues with like bloating, and that would like sabotage their self-esteem. Come to find out in their food logs, they're eating protein bars that contain maltitol, sorbitol, all of these like ingredients like inulin or chicory root, and when they have dysregulated digestion, those products can over ferment in the digestive tract and lead to things like gas and bloating and a lot of discomfort. So learning like the quality of their food is a big one too, and when they improve the quality and they remain that consistent, then they understand a little bit more about how that nutrition is impacting their fitness as a whole. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it's like what I'm hearing is that you go through a series of levels of like experimentation, kind of starting off with a standardized approach, right? And then you're paying attention to key signs with how your client is doing to
Yes.
start looking at like, okay, cool, what do I adjust from here, right? Like, is their menstrual cycle adjusting? How are they dealing with these other stressors? Probably are they even like sticking with this particular plan or not, right? Because if they're probably falling off that plan, then I would imagine that like something is going on in the system, right? Like it's not just about, I think a lot of times we look at something, and this can be the case, right, but where it's like just discipline. But a lot of times in my own experience, it's not like trying harder. Like trying harder doesn't really like solve the
Yeah.
problem most of the time. It's usually something else that's going on, whether it's too much stress or whether it's just like you don't have a system or you don't have the habit set up, or you are eating a food that's making you crash, and so you're craving more food later on, or what, that kind of thing.
And it can also be their environment, like the people that they live with, the way that their kitchen is set up. That also plays a pretty big role as well.
Yeah. What are like the top three like red flags that you would see in how a client is adjusting to a protocol where you're like, oh, I've got to change XYZ3? If like they're the top three like stressors or ways that their behavior or body is shifting.
Sleep is a big one. Like if they have a solid sleep routine and they're still struggling with sleep, then that's a red flag. Um, Menstrual, of course, how regular, and this is pertaining to women who are not on hormonal birth control. It's a little bit difficult to use that data if somebody's on hormonal birth control, but if someone's not on it, and I did not realize my other cat was in here. You
Oh,
snuck
it's
in.
okay.
You
It's
sneaky
fine. It's fine.
girl. Yeah, so that makes it a little bit difficult sometimes. But sleep is a big one, and digestion too. Like if their digestion is thrown off, then there's something there. I really appreciate it though when I have clients who advocate to their doctors to get lab work and share it, because then it gives us more insight on like what's going on internally. It's a little bit more difficult going based solely off physiological cues, because sometimes sleep can just be shit because of like a heat wave and it's just fucking hot. It doesn't
Right,
mean there's
right.
anything wrong with your body, but it's difficult to sleep in a heat wave, or if you're at a music festival, or if there's construction. And like, also with digestion too. Like if somebody just has like the off day where they eat like, an ingredient that doesn't react well with their body, then, that's just like a one-off thing. Whereas if we get lab work, there's more insight on what's going on internally. So I'm like a huge advocate for women getting lab work, checking their hormones, checking their thyroid, and just getting regular labs. Like I get labs at least every 3 to 4 months, basic, and
Hmm.
then every 6 months I get something more comprehensive, like a complete blood count, metabolic, thyroid. In a few weeks, I do have another set of labs coming up. I'm going to check my cortisol, my progesterone, and estrogen, because I feel like those are not doing too great right now. So I want to see exactly, what it is that I'm working with, so that way I can strategize. And because I feel like my cortisol is a little bit elevated right now, again, I'm going just based off of my own guess, and also my last labs, it was already a little bit on the high end. I am taking a little bit of a break, so I'm working escape, but until then, I promised myself I'm not going to go to any events, so that I can focus on recovery, focus on, just kind of like getting more rest and recovery, like yoga and deep breathing, and nothing that's going to be overstimulating. So we were anticipating going to like Dead Mouse this weekend, but sometimes we have to make the decision to hold back so that we can push ourselves forward in other areas.
Yeah, no, I feel you. I'm hitting a place in my own fitness journey right now where I've gotten to a level of strength, and then I always hit a certain plateau with my lifts, mostly due to like injury and mobility issues. And I had started working on my mobility earlier this year, but more recently I've decided I'm just gonna go down to just 2 weeks in the gym, or 2 days a week in the gym, and then like like 3 days of really hammering my mobility workouts, because my mobility workouts that I do through Beard the Best You, if you follow him on Instagram. He's a great mobility coach. His stuff is like, I'm exhausted after these
Oh yeah,
workouts. Yeah,
mobility is tough. I have been working a
yeah.
lot on my mobility. I actually took down, so I lift about 3 times a week right now.
Hmm.
But on 2 of those days, it's either yoga or mobility focus, and I
Hmm.
feel super sore when I am working on my mobility. Like my lower my lower core, I've been working really hard on. Like my upper core is pretty strong, but my lower core, my pelvic stability, I had a car accident a few years ago, and I was stupid to like keep. So I actually got into a car accident about 4 weeks out from my bodybuilding show, and I was still like trying to push heavy, and I had a psoas spasm. So I developed like a little bit of a lateral hip shift, and I was like, so like if I don't push myself hard, I'm not going to progress. So I like kind of dug myself into this imbalance, and so doing this mobility, I'm like sore in places that I have never been sore before, and it feels good. But like it is tough to recover from a solid mobility session, especially
Yeah.
when you're like really taking it slow, really focusing. Like I have this visualization technique that I use, is I visualize my skeleton. I literally just try to think of myself as a bag of bones moving through mobility. And I swear it's so weird. And like our pelvis and our rib cage are like two buckets stacked on top of each other that you can like manipulate. And it's so interesting to like use that. It's perfect going into spooky season. But like that visualization has improved my mobility in a lot of ways, and that in turn has improved my performance in my lifts. Even though I'm not necessarily lifting any heavier than I used to in most of them, I'm lifting better. Like I can feel it differently, and it feels more effective. And I found that like that's improved my performance at the rave too. Like I'm in less pain. I honestly came back from Los Angeles, I didn't have any neck pain despite going
Wow.
absolutely ham the entire time.
Yeah, that's super funny because I actually never really get neck pain, even though I'm mostly a headbanger like yourself, and like do a lot of these things. People will be like, "Oh, look my neck" or whatever. And I'm like, I'm honestly fine. And I don't know if it's just like a strength thing or if I have some weird mobility thing. I've
Those
recently.
RDLs, if you headbang like you're doing an RDL, you're
That's
using
fair.
less of your cervical spine and more of your whole body.
There we go. So I just have better headbanging form than most people.
Exactly.
Awesome. Cool. Um, are there any other tips like that, I guess, that you would have for taking care of yourself at a rave in particular?
Do stretching and mobility before the rave. I
Mm.
and also like don't internalize the message of like, oh, I'm a 25-year-old raver, I rely on Tums, I rely on stretching, like it's a
Mhm.
bad thing. Like, well, Tums, if you're eating something that's causing heartburn burn, that's probably something you want to address. But when it comes to like pre-rave stretching, pre-rave mobility, like it helps if you go into the rave already aware of your posture and your body and like, I kind of woke up a little bit stiff here, and if I move this way it helps. Then you go into the rave and you're already aware of like, your body, your center of gravity, and things that are going to help you feel better. Like I went into Lost Lands, like I actually went to Lost Lands, and my hip injury was flaring up a little bit.
Mhm.
And before the shows, I would do my mobility, and literally by the end of the first day of Lost Lands, my hip felt totally fine, felt
Wow.
great even. And I was like, I felt better than I went going in because I spent 5 to 10 minutes in the morning just doing a little bit of mobility, getting into my body, which is really important when you're on that kind of terrain too. So don't
Yeah.
neglect taking care of yourself going into the show. Get your electrolytes and also fucking eat. We need we need calories to recover. Like you can take amino acid supplements, sure, that can help a little bit, but like you need carbohydrates too. You need a little bit of healthy fats. Try not to go too high on the fats because it can again trigger heartburn, and it's the slowest to digest macronutrient. Um, but fuel your body, and if you can't eat much during the show, have some small snacks. Like this is my routine. I will have a decent sized breakfast when I wake up. I will snack throughout the day at the show on like small meals, and then right before bed that will be probably my biggest meal of the day because one, I just did a 8-hour hit workout. My body needs that nutrition to recover, and you basically sleep through breakfast when you're going to a multi-day show. So it's almost like preemptive nutrition planning. And also try to keep your food simple. I personally like, if I am at a festival, I'll have like one or two food vendors that are like my go-tos because it's more simple food, right? It's something that I know is not going to digest well. I know a lot of us like to treat ourselves at the rave to these like exotic food vendors, but if you're trying to feel comfortable, if you want your digestion to be good and you don't want a lot of excess bloating or heartburn, like try to keep your food simple, super simple. That's going to do you a lot of favors on the dance floor and keep your energy and vibe high.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think one of the pieces that has worked really well for me as well is like to your point, like I always eat like a pretty heavy carb dinner at the end of the day, like even if it's a couple slices of pizza or whatever that might be, because whatever might be in my system or just being really, really amped up from the rave itself, it's like that just helps me, get the serotonin molecules in my body to settle down and let me go to sleep and just kind of absorb whatever else is going on in my stomach.
Exactly. And complex carbohydrates help support melatonin as well.
Hmm. Right.
And the
Yeah.
protein, like protein, amino acids, tryptophan, tyrosine, help replenish serotonin and dopamine. Like, I think that's so undervalued in our nutrition. And like,
Hmm.
when I work with some women too, and I look at their food logs for the first week, like their protein is abysmal. Our RDA is a joke because like RDA is based off of like somebody who's sedentary, and somebody who's trying to build muscle is going to have a much higher protein need than somebody who's like just sitting on their butt all day doing absolutely nothing. It also helps support thyroid hormone too, which supports our energy. So like protein, complex carbohydrates, those are things that really help with pushing post-festival recovery, but you need to make sure that you're actually doing that during the rave, not just after.
Yeah. Are there ways that you recommend getting high amounts of protein in during a rave and festival? Because I feel like that's one of the more challenging things to do. Because like I can bring a bunch of like protein shakes, and that's kind of been like what I've done to kind of help supplement that. But it still ends up being like I don't know, I'm eating a bunch of protein shakes, and that's not necessarily the best way of getting protein source, right? Yeah. Wait.
So yeah, I try not to be too dependent on like protein fortified products. I will have like one protein shake a day, mixed in with my coffee the morning of a festival because that's just like that's kind of like my routine. But when it comes to like getting protein in at the festival, the first thing I do when I get into a festival is I scope out the vendors. I look at what vendors are available, and typically like Mexican food vendors are going to be the safest bet because you can ask for ingredients a la carte. Like you can get just like a side of rice and a side of chicken. Typically, I don't eat the vegetables inside because more often than not, they're undercooked. They contain broccoli and onion, which have a high likelihood of contributing to gas and bloating because if it's undercooked, it's if you look up FODMAP, FODMAP, anything that's high on the FODMAP scale, when your digestion is like dysregulated from like rave jitters or drinking alcohol, like those are things that can again trigger more digestive issues. So typically I'll avoid the vegetables at the vendors and focus on just like super simple ingredients. I'll also bring snacks in too that I know digest well with my body, like trail mix. RX bars is like one of the protein bars that I really like because there's no like additives. It's just like dates, egg whites, and almonds, and it's super delicious. Or Nature Valley bars, those are pretty good too. But yeah, like I'll scope out the vendors, see what there is available, and see if there's any of them that can do like a la carte menu. So things that are like rice and chicken are honestly my go-tos.
Great.
As basic bodybuilder as that sounds.
No, there's a reason it's worked, right?
Oh yeah.
Um, is there anything that you would adjust about like or recommend adjusting either pre or post somebody's diet before and after a festival in particular? I know you said there's like a level of customization for it, so I know that that is always there, but are there kind of general principles that you would kind of lean on for the most part?
So typically with my clients, what I do is the days leading up to a festival, it is individual. Like if somebody is able to practice intuitive eating, just making sure that they're eating enough food, that's totally fine. Because I know that like they're getting ready for the festival, they are getting plans set, they're traveling, they're trying to focus on like a lot of different things. But we go like based off of their food logs, like, what foods have responded well with your body, try to go for those choices. And if you're trying to like, have like something that's like a little bit more exotic, try to wait until the festival's over so that way your digestion isn't like messed up. I do have an ebook that I give them too, and it's like Feeling Yourself for the Festival. These are like different options that you can bring with you when you're camping, bring into the festival. These are things to be aware of when it comes to your nutrition, but also like it depends too on what stage they're in their journey. Are they in a fat loss stage? Are they in a muscle growth phase? Are they in a maintenance phase? If they were in a cut and they were consistent, they might need that extra carb boost the week before. So it's almost like, how marathon runners will like have extra carbohydrates leading into a race. It's very similar for like ravers because again, you're dancing for hours, if not days straight. You'll want to increase your carbohydrate consumption just a little bit, focusing on whole food carbohydrates. That's a thing. That's the biggest thing too. It's like try to get things that are as minimally processed possible. Potatoes, rice, those are great. See what like bananas are really good too. Those are really nice and starchy. But trying to like shove in a lot of carbohydrates from less than healthful sources, it's not going to benefit you as much, especially if they're like very high sugar forms of carbohydrate that like push your blood sugar up and then crash it down. That can actually stress your body out even more and impair post-rave recovery.
Great.
So
Awesome.
then, yeah, it's definitely individual. It's just based on like their consistency, based on the data, based on the stage they're at. But I never want someone to go into a festival with the mindset like I want to like eat less to like dance it off and come back and have lost weight. Like personally for me, if you're focusing on fat loss, you have every other week to focus on it. At the rave, you should be focusing on maximizing your energy. And that comes from the food that you take in. And the quality of that energy depends on the quality of the food that you're taking in. I find it a win if I go to an event and I come back and I've lost a minimal amount of weight. Like when I came back from Lost Lands, I was down only half a pound, and I consider that a win. Because that means I ate enough to maintain my weight, which meant that I was taking in enough energy to enough food to maintain my energy. And I swear, like my energy was the best it's ever been this year, despite going into it already dealing with like some fatigue from the last few weeks and a month and a half. I still had really good energy at Lost Lands this year.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there anything different that you did in particular with like regarding to, I don't know, any habits like meditation or anything intentional to kind of intentionally reduce stress either before, during, or after Lost Lands?
Journaling has been a huge thing for me, and I always struggled with journaling. And it wasn't until I started working with my current coach that I finally got much more consistent about it. I also got a locking journal too. I did not realize that one of my biggest barriers was feeling like if I wrote it in my journal that somebody could find it and read it. Like I was able
Mm-hmm.
to really like word vomit some of the deepest thoughts that I have and the honesty that I needed to have with myself, especially since my platform it grew so much this year. Like a year ago, my Instagram had about 1,700 followers, and I actually deleted 400 of them because I saw that there were like some that were like not real accounts, and I was like, I don't want that. I want real people on my page, and so I had in January I had about 1,400 followers, and then I had two reels back in February went really viral and brought a lot of people to my page. And again, like those reels were literally just me sharing, like, I used to feel this way in my fitness journey and in the rave community with my health and fitness. Like it was just like a super basic, like this is me and this was my struggles and this is what I do. And it just brought a lot of women to my page, and I'm like so grateful. But it also brought up a lot of challenging things, a lot of limiting beliefs, and again, some things from my past back in high school. So journaling has really made me take those thoughts and take some of those, yeah, just leave it like thoughts and work through them, figure out like where they come from and what's the reality. And the biggest thing too is like I write down like how do I currently feel, and then how do I want to feel, and then how do I get to where I want to feel. When I did an Instagram takeover for I Heart Raves, which was actually a dream of mine since I started raving back in 2015. I always wanted to be like part of the unicorn crew and like, represent them. But I never, like back then I was like never accepted into it. And I was just like, I kind of gave up on it for a long time. Not necessarily gave up, like my focus shifted. I'll say that. I didn't really give up on it. I just kind of like my focus shifted. And yeah, like when I went to Wasteland, I was feeling a lot of anxiety. I also started my period the day before I went to do that, so that didn't help. So I literally journaled before heading to Wasteland, like how do I want to feel? How do I want to present myself? How do I want my energy to be in this environment? Because like I was feeling a little bit bloated, I was a little constipated, as normal for like that first day of my cycle, and like reminding myself that like that's not the thing that people are going to notice. The thing that people notice most is your personality, who you are, what you're passionate about. Your body is not the sole focus. It's your energy. It's who you believe yourself to be. And I think that a lot of women, we put so much pressure. Like we think that people perceive us one way based on how our body looks. But I have learned that's quite the opposite, because I am nowhere near my leanness. I am nowhere near my smallness. And yet I feel the most confident that I ever had, and that resonates with a lot of people. I feel the healthiest that I ever had, at events, mentally and physically, than I ever did before. And that's the most important thing. And journaling has really helped me kind of like hone in on that. So I'd say journaling is like one of the biggest things. You have to align your physical health journey with your mental health journey. Because if you're trying to focus on one and not the other, you're going to crash and burn eventually. Your physical health supports your mental health, and your mental health supports your physical health.
Yeah, no, I agree. Anything like that is a cycle. I think often we often wonder about like the chicken and the egg kind of conversations like that, right? Like, do thoughts create feelings, or feelings to create thoughts? And like they both inform one another. And it's the same thing with food and our mentality and our fitness and our mentality. So I'm curious if you're getting somebody to start, and like you're taking them from ground zero, and you're like, okay, we're gonna get both your mental health and your fitness on track. Like, what would be the first thing that you'd have them do?
Figure out what their nutrition is like. If your energy levels are up and down so much throughout the day, that may very well be due to your nutrition. So, what do we need to adjust with your nutrition to keep your energy levels more consistent so you can do the things that you want to do? Like, if you're so tired after work that you can't work out, okay, well, we need to look at what's going on. How's your nutrition? Are you drinking enough water? How's your sleep habits? Like, yes, we program in workouts, but ultimately, like, we have to look at what their habits are like as a whole, and it comes from what they're putting into their body and what they're doing with their body. If somebody is eating a really unhealthy diet, and then they're going and raving and stressing their body out, and they're just sleeping like shit for the next day, and they're doing all-nighters every single week, and then they're throwing alcohol in the mix, or or drugs into the mix. Like those are things that can tell a lot about, why they feel the way that they do. And I'm not saying like somebody has to give up going to events, but maybe they'll have to cut down on how often they're going to afters while they're working on their health, making sure that they're preparing food ahead of time versus saving it for the day after, thinking like, oh, I'll go to a rave on Saturday and meal prep Sunday, but come Sunday they're sleeping all day, they wake up, they're drained and sore, and then they have chores. Like, it's about finding that balance with what their lifestyle is like, but also understanding like there's going to be some give and take. Again, I've worked with girls, and I'm not going to pretend that every single client I work with has been successful, but ultimately the ones that take my advice do succeed. The ones that don't. They they remain stuck, or they sometimes find themselves backtracking. And that's one of the hardest things about being a coach, especially when you really care about the community, is you can support someone, you can educate them, you can give them all the tools and resources they need to succeed, but ultimately if they're not willing to make those changes, even just like at least if I'm giving 3 suggestions, if they implement at least one of those suggestions, they're going to see a difference. But if they refuse to implement any of them, then there's really not much that a coach can do other than just, be there when you need them if you stay. So it's about choosing, like, do you really want to feel the way that you want to feel, or do you want to keep feeling the way that you felt?
Yeah. When somebody gets like that, where they are not, taking any of the advice, or they're not going on with you, like, in your own experience, like, what do you feel like is going on for them? Because, they've invested a good amount of money, a good amount of time. Like, fitness coaches are usually not the cheapest things out there by any means, and it's a super worthy investment with what you get and everything. But, you know, why do you think there are people who, not that why do they exist, but like, what do you think it is that's keeping them from actually taking that action?
Often environment and influences, like their friend group, their family, what's going on in their life, and also just like how long have they used those habits as a crutch for the way that they feel. It can be more difficult, and again, that's a really that is a tough question, because I've had some people who they've fallen off for like 3 or 4 months at a time. They come back, and then suddenly it's like just a complete shift, and they're like starting to be consistent. They're showing up more, and they're like, okay, well, I am struggling right now similarly to I was struggling before, but I really want to overcome this. I really want your support and your help, and I'm willing to make some of these changes. And those people, they'll start to build that confidence. Like, this is the thing too, like with your fitness journey, confidence doesn't come from reaching your fitness goals. Like, that's the goal outcome, but the confidence comes from you taking actions that lead you towards that version of yourself. It's not about reaching the end goal. The confidence is built along the way because you're upholding integrity to becoming the person that you want to become. And somebody who, again, who's fallen off, come back and they actually stick with it, or maybe they experience a challenge, but they're like, I didn't really show up the way that I should have. I acknowledge that, but I'm not going to run away like I did last time. Like, those people, those are the ones that are more likely to sustain their results than somebody who's like falls off, comes back, and then falls off again 2 weeks later, and it's like, oh, you know what, it's just like last time, I fucked up, you know what, I'm done.
Mm. Yeah.
But that's
Yeah.
definitely one of the hardest parts about being a coach, is you really want everyone to succeed.
Mhm.
Everyone. Every client that I work with, I care very deeply about. And so that's definitely, like, again, why journaling has been so important for me too, is because, as somebody who cares very deeply about the community and the people that they work with, not everybody's gonna be successful. And I feel like a lot of coaches are not honest about this enough.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's honestly a really great point. Is I think even framing that at the beginning of the conversation, and I'm somebody, I was director of sales for a neuroscience company. I took them from like 1.5 million to $3.5 million a year, so I did a lot of sales stuff, and like it is like one of the most powerful things you can do is like is frame the expectations appropriately from the beginning, and like even if those same things come true, so often that is all it takes to like mitigate the issues. Like letting somebody know that, hey, this might not work for you. It gives them like the stress relief that they need to trust more of the program, to like have the flexibility of what's going to go on with their body, the trial and the error. Versus I feel like so often people in the sales position for like a fitness coach or whatever, they can feel like, oh, you're going to get these goals in like 3 months versus like, hey, this is going to take a year or 2 years to really get to here. And like through that process, this is what it's going to look like, and actually paint the actual realistic picture for people, I think is one of the most valuable things that anyone can do in that position. So, assuming that you're doing that, I think that's great,
Oh
a
yeah.
great job. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like to give false promises at all. I do like to reiterate to anybody that I start working with is like, look, if your goal is to lose like 20 pounds and your goal is to like get that in 3 months, I'm gonna tell you like we could most likely get 10 of that off. But ultimately, like you're gonna get the tools that you need from this program to be able to continue on. And
Hmm.
by the end of the 6 months, either you've reached 20 pounds or you're at least getting close to, and you
Hmm.
understand your body that you can manipulate things to help you get to that point in a healthy, sustainable way. There's
Yeah.
also a lot of coaches that, this is a method that actually I was taught in one of my certifications that I really don't agree with. And that was one where it's like get your clients a fast win so that they like want to stay with you. And it was like giving like a much lower carbohydrate, much lower fat. And I was just like, I'm not about that. I would rather start someone off and find out like, what is their maintenance at? What are their habits like? Like, I don't
Right.
want someone to drop 5 pounds in the first week of my program. Like that's happened maybe like 2 times, and that was solely because they were drinking more water and they started eating less processed food because of the awareness that they gained from tracking. But that does not happen very often, and I'm not gonna lie. Like I really don't like that kind of structure. Like again, this is why I have multiple certifications and I went through different companies too, is because some of them I agree with and some of them I'm like this is not something that is going to be applicable or successful in my niche.
Hmm. Yeah, well, you mentioned it before, like just having the different, whatever you call it, like the different certifications. What are the different certifications you have, and like, can you tell us a little bit about them, why you got each of them?
Yeah. So my first one was the basic personal training certification through American Council of Exercise. Then I went to National Academy of Sports Medicine. Sorry, let me drink a little bit of water.
You're good.
Um, in ASM, I got a corrective exercise certification because, if we move better, we'll want to move more efficient. And then I got a nutrition certification, which honestly was just basically review of my nutrition class back in college when I got my degree. So it was like not too difficult. And then I went to ISSA, International Sports Science Association, and got a strength and conditioning certification. Right now, I am working on a certification from Clean Health, and that is just another nutrition certification that's a lot more in depth than the NASM one. It does have like 3 different layers to it, so I'm only on like the first layer, but it is definitely a lot more in depth. And I think there's a little bit, there's an endocrinology module in the second level that I'm looking forward to.
Beautiful. And I'm curious, with all of these different certifications, what are some of the things that you have seen that are congruent and synergistic? Like, what are the things that like is aligning that you're finding is working from all of these different systems? Like, what parts are unique or not unique, but how do I say it? Like, they line up in each of them. They're not competing or they're not disagreeing.
I'm trying to figure out how to answer that question. Like, is there similarities between them? Is
I
that
guess
what
I guess
you?
I guess the question is because they're different certifications, so I'm sure that they're different perspectives. Like, what are like some of the key principles that they all agree on?
So with the exercise certifications, things like the basic personal training, the corrective exercise, and the strength and conditioning certification, the biggest thing is just like starting off with something that's manageable, not trying to like go straight into like 4 or 5 workouts a week, especially if you're like a novice, if you haven't been consistent, you don't want to like overdo it from the start, and really putting like a focus on proper movement patterns. Like with my clients, I highly, highly encourage them to send me exercise videos. Like, when they're doing an exercise, send me a clip and I can give some feedback on their technique, things to make their exercise more effective. So it's kind of like, it's a little bit more difficult when you're an online coach because as an in-person trainer, you're able to like physically be there and see it. But the nice thing about online coaching is like, you're not just going to see your trainer once a week because that's all you can afford. Because four workouts with a personal trainer a month is about the same as a month with a online coach who's giving you multiple workouts, mobility, who's giving you nutrition. So it's like it's not too much of like a something that's like out of your way to like send a video for that technique feedback. So it's like all of those certifications basically support like movement screening and proper movement patterns. So it's like my clients who are more proactive about sending me those videos for that feedback typically will see like more improvements in their performance and their strength as well. So that's some of the overlap between those. I think that answers. Does that answer anything?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, what I heard from that, right, is like you said, like start manageable and small. So like starting from a place of not just jumping in, not getting too hard, and then the focus on correct movement, right? So like I think to
Yes.
your point, like so many of us, and I'm guilty of this even when I think first got back into it, right? It was like, oh, I want to get back into working out. I'm doing it 4 times a week. I'm getting into all these lifts that I did back when I was like in like late college or a little bit out of college, and my body hasn't done these things in a while, right? And so going back in and like letting go of ego, I think more and more, and being like, it doesn't matter how big the weights are, right? Get those movements down really, really correct. And when you're doing those things, then it allows for you can build on something versus like at least a lot of the pattern I exhibited early on was just like getting to a point and then regressing because I would get to an injury or I'd have something else happen and then have to go back anyway. And instead, I was like trying to push myself through that versus like now I'm at a point where if I have any pain at all, I'm like, nope, I'm just going to go down significantly in weight and like really work on the movement because there's probably some minor muscle in there that isn't strong enough to do this heavier weight yet that just needs more work done in this other place.
And exercise selection is a big thing too. There's a lot of people that will follow like TikTok or Instagram workouts of their influencers who have a body that they want, but they're like doing single leg Bulgarians or like
Hmm.
some type of like crazy exercise that is not, it requires like a lot of stability, a lot of mobility, and this might be somebody who doesn't have that yet. So it's
Hmm.
about figuring out what their starting point is. And again, this is what, when somebody gives me a video for technique feedback, I can use that, and also their progress photos too. Like if I look at their posture and notice something, that's something that we can address. But if you're like introducing crazy complicated exercises and you're switching it up every 2 weeks, then somebody is not going to progress and they can increase their risk of injury. So that's like another thing that was like overlap too that I forgot to mention is like exercise selection is key. Don't overcomplicate it. Focus on getting good at the basic movements and slowly introduce things that are new that challenge you in different ways. Don't go from doing like absolutely nothing to single leg Smith machine squats on a bazoo ball. Nobody needs to do that shit if you have not been consistent. And even then, like most people, like if you don't have proper balance, what makes you think you're going to suddenly have proper balance there?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a great point. Like focus on the simple things that you can do over and over again. Become a master of the basics, and I think it's true for anything. I think of like even Kobe Bryant when it comes to basketball. Like he was a huge proponent on going back and mastering like the basic footwork, right? Because everybody would get so deep in these advanced pieces, and it's like it doesn't matter if you don't have this foundation. So yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah.
Is there anything kind of like
Same thing with
similar?
shuffling too. Like the running man is like a really good basic move. People like try to like start doing all of these like crazy
Mhm.
shuffling moves. Like just try to get good at the running man. You could do
Yeah,
so much with just the running man.
yeah, no, absolutely. Um, is there anything like of a similar vein as far as like from a nutritional standpoint that aligns between like all of these different certifications? I guess most of them are more maybe exercise based, but I'm curious, is there anything that you're seeing that like is an overlap or is congruent amongst like differing viewpoints?
Um, So the main thing is like focusing on the quality of their nutrition first and foremost. Again, like the first week or two that I work with someone, we're kind of establishing what their baseline is, what their habits are like, and we try to like either get some more whole foods in there, get some more fruits and vegetables, or we
Mm.
try to shift some of their choices from like highly processed to like a homemade version that is easy to make. Like I had somebody who would get like frozen Jimmy D egg McMuffins, but I was like, look, if you have a mini waffle maker, get some whole wheat English muffins, throw an egg in that waffle maker. You
Yeah.
can make homemade egg sandwiches much healthier for you, and you can like modify those ingredients. So you can use like a lean turkey patty instead of like getting something that has, you know, a lot more saturated fats. You're gonna have something that's a little bit lower in that regard, but higher in protein content. You get more fiber in there. So it's like making these small changes to their overall nutrition. I actually have one woman who actually she cleaned out a lot of the food in her pantry and her freezer so she can replenish it with more whole food options. And she's starting to see that her weight is trending down a little bit quicker now. She had to kind of go through, like, she had to get a little creative in the beginning because, of course, you know, wasting food isn't always the best. Like, if you could donate, or if you have a garbage dump husband who will eat anything and be fine, that's helpful. But yeah, so she would like kind of get creative. She tried to take the food that she had, fit it in her nutrition goals, and as she started to like empty her fridge and pantry, she's replenishing with more whole foods. So we're seeing this shift in her habits as a whole, and those are things that she can carry with her when she like travels, you know? Like, when you work on your nutrition habits back at home and you really understand your body, those choices follow you wherever you go.
Yeah. So what I kind of heard in that was that when you mentioned like basically improving the quality of the food, so it's less of the initial focus on necessarily like calories or macros or what it is, but like what are those calories and macros made out of, right? Are you getting 30 or 300 grams or whatever it would be, like 100 grams of carbs, right? But you're getting all of those from, you know, Sour Patch Kids versus you're getting those from rice, or you're getting them from, you know, other forms of healthy carbohydrates, right? You're making sure the quality of the nutrition in the foods that you eat are as good as possible, before even really worrying about the other aspects of it.
Exactly. And another thing too is like, you know, I will have clients like, you know, we love having like a treat every now and then, of course. Like, I had somebody who ate a sleeve of Pop Tarts every single day. But what we did was like, okay, how about this? We're gonna have one Pop Tart at the end of the day, but make sure the rest of the day that we're giving your body what it needs. I don't think that, like, you know, eliminating all processed food is the way to go, but, you know, slowly reducing it and then making sure that we're giving the body what it needs so it functions well. That's the important thing.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think for myself too, it's what I've noticed is it's like prioritizing the nutrition part, and then it's like adding a little bit of like fun food or whatever at in the evening, to your point, right? That single Pop Tart or whatever it might be. Versus if you start your day with those things, or you're putting those things as a priority in front of it, you get full and don't want to eat or get bloated, and now you don't have space for like what your body's craving. And I know one thing that I've really learned with my own body is like when my body is nutritionally fed, I am just less hungry overall. Like, I don't crave as much other food because I think part of what my body's seeking in more food is like finding those micronutrients. It's all those other little pieces that it's trying to gather, right? Versus just the calories in and of themselves.
Yeah. And like starting your day off with like a high sugar, low protein, low fiber breakfast, like your energy is going to go up and down, and then you're going to be starving. You might not even feel physical hunger too. Like, I've seen this a lot where someone doesn't really eat much. Like, they'll not eat in the morning because they don't have an appetite, and the first meal is like something that's like heavily processed, a lot of sugar, low fiber, low protein, and they notice that like they eat that, and then an hour later they're hungry, but they're craving that type of food again. Like, the way that you start your day really does have a huge influence on the rest of your day. I'm not gonna say it always dictates, because no matter what your choice is, you can make a different choice an hour later. But ultimately, like, when you have that massive spike in energy and then that massive drop in energy because you haven't gotten enough fiber or protein to help prolong it, your brain kind of goes on autopilot, and you get these like these symptoms like low energy, fatigue, and you're almost like, I just need something with energy. And carbohydrates are the simplest form of energy, quickest form of energy. So somebody who starts their day off with like cereal or Pop Tart or a donut or a Starbucks Frappuccino or like a pumpkin spice latte,
Yeah.
2 hours later, their energy's gonna be low, blood sugar's down, brain is on autopilot, and next thing you know, they're reaching for the candy. They're reaching for. I actually had a client when she started working with me early last year. She's been in the program for about a year and a half now. She would start her day off with candy. She ate fast food 5 times a week. Now she eats fast food maybe twice a week, if that. She doesn't start her day off with candy. She's built muscle. She's had an incredible change in her body composition, her energy levels, and she works a really fucking stressful job too. Like, she's been on on a wild ride this last year, and she's overcome all these challenges because she has better energy to deal with it. Like, the when you fuel your body well, you can deal with stress so much better.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. Um, One kind of like we're running to the end of the episode, so I want to make weary of time. But one question I had a friend wanted to know, and I'm curious as well. You kind of mentioned some of these, specific minerals or vitamins like tryptophan, et cetera, amino acids. What are some like the key supplements that you use, either both during a festival and then maybe just like on your regular basis at home as well?
So for me, I do take vitamin D regularly. I've gotten lab work and I've been on the lowish side. So I try to, this is why lab work is so important, because if you just throw supplements willy-nilly, you don't really know if something is working for you or not. Like there was a period I stopped taking my vitamin D for like a month and a half. I got labs and I was back down. So I started implementing my vitamin D more regularly. I take about 5,000 international units a day because I also work inside. I'm probably going to keep that throughout the winter and then evaluate, see if if I'm going to maintain that dose or if I'm going to change it. I also take a B complex as well. I take a methylated B complex, and I also take magnesium glycinate because that helps with nervous system and hormonal regulation. I take ashwagandha at night because my cortisol levels were a bit elevated last time I checked, and so I take that in the evening. And that's pretty much it. I sometimes will take rhodiola for my ADHD. Um, and yeah, I kind of keep things fairly simple, and then I take creatine as well. But I freaking hate that I use capsules. I need to get I need to get the powder because I hate taking so many capsules of the creatine. But those are pretty much it. When I'm at a festival, I just kind of keep the same thing. I keep taking my B complex, my vitamin D. I take my magnesium at night, and that's pretty much it for a festival. Or I'll also take like vitamin C gummies. Like at Lost Lands, we had some vitamin C gummies, and I took those daily. And I'll also say like this is the first time that I came back from Lost Lands and didn't get like a major illness. Like I had a little bit of a cold and a little fatigue, but like last times I've gotten the full on WIC flu, like a cough, out
Oh
for the
wow.
count, major fever. This time I did not get that at all. In fact, like considering the like I worked Wasteland the weekend before, the stress, like I'm actually pretty impressed that I didn't get any sicker than I did.
Mm, yeah, that I'm fortunate enough to where like I for whatever reason just like never get sick from festivals. Like occasionally if there's a lot of dust, that's really the thing that will kind of like knock me out, or just being tired. But I'm fortunate enough to like I have a pretty robust immune system, I guess. Um, with the like kind of post festival blues that can happen for a lot of people, do you have any recommendations for keeping motivation like kind of after a festival when it comes to like working out and that kind of thing, or do you encourage people to take like a week off and like allow yourself to really rest and recover and come back in? Like how do you manage that part?
So first thing, like the first few days that a client comes back from a festival, we focus on just mobility. When you're dancing, you have all this repetitive movement. If you have imbalances, that repetitive movement can aggravate some of those imbalances. So we focus on implementing mobility first, a little bit of stretching. And then the first few workouts back, we acknowledge like, look, we're not trying to push super hard. We're just trying to get back into the gym. If you can't finish the workout, that's fine. Go in with the amount of time you have, because let's be honest, when you come back from a festival, you have to unpack, you have to clean, you have to, like, first things first, meal prep. Like, that should be the biggest thing, too. Like, when you come back from a festival, the first thing you should be focused on is getting back on track with your nutrition. Like, the workouts, you can push that to the later part of the week, but focus on going to the grocery store and meal prepping first. Have the food. And then the first few workouts back, like, take it light. You could do mobility at home, that way you can like throw it in when you're doing your laundry and stuff. But if somebody's like, struggling with the WIC flu, it might prolong that period. The first workout back is still going to be easy, but it might be the next week. Instead, when you're at home, focus on taking care of your body while you're sick. And it also depends on the severity too. Like if they had a cough, a lower respiratory infection, we definitely don't want to be pushing. If anything, like I would say stay away from the gym if you can, kind of depending on the severity, but, ultimately, you don't want to be pushing your body super hard in this recovery period. Also when you're sick, like focus on, taking care of your body, hydrating enough, catching up on sleep, moving your body with intention, but not like trying to push yourself super hard. And those are some things that like help ease back into the routine, taking the pressure away from yourself. Like you might have been hitting PRs before heading to the festival, but don't expect that the first week back, even the second week, like you're probably not going to be hitting PRs, and that's okay. It's about being back in the routine and taking that pressure away from yourself. So many people fall off of fitness because of that pressure they put on themselves, because they'll go on vacation or to a rave and come back, they're a little tired and they're like, well, I don't want to work out and have it be pointless because I couldn't push myself. Like, that's not it. It's not that it's pointless. It's still like realigning your body, and in fact it helps your recovery.
Yeah, yeah, no, I 100% agree. So that's beautiful. Well, we are at the end of the episode, even though I have a million more questions. I could talk to you for hours. One question I like to ask people at the end of the episode is like, what's one question that you would ask the audience? What's something that you would have them maybe think about differently, or a question that might shift their perspective in a meaningful way?
Are you choosing to surround yourself with people who inspire you to be better? Or are you choosing to surround yourself with people who you're innately comparing yourself to, who are holding you back in not just like taking care of yourself at the rave, but also just like the way that they talk to themselves? Do you choose to surround yourself in a constructive environment, both on social media and in your normal day to day life? Or are you surrounding yourself with people who are innately keeping you stuck? And that level of honesty, it's hard to be honest with yourself about that. It's so hard to be honest because ultimately, like, we want to feel a sense of belonging, and especially in the rave community, like, it's about all are welcome, but like, you have to choose what you're welcoming into your life. So if
Mm,
you want to change your position, ask yourself, are you welcoming the right environment, the right people? And that's a big thing.
beautiful. Great, great button to end on. Dana, this is a pleasure. If people want to follow you, stick around with you, like, what's the best place to find you?
I am Dana F. Fit on Instagram and TikTok, and just Dana Foster on Facebook. I'll have the same profile photo on all of them.
Great. Well, this was an absolute blast, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Ciao.